So yes, Monaco Grand Prix weekend, the middle race in what is a triple header. Monaco, of course, held a Grand Prix in pretty much every single F1 season, bar a couple. Makes up 1/3 of the illustrious Triple Crown of Motorsport alongside the Indy 500, which for the last time this year is taking place on the same day. And the 24-hour of Le Mans completes the treble. It has, in its 100-year history, pretty much not changed. The track has undergone a few changes, but for the most part, it is as it was nearly 100 years ago. Last year, of course, Charles Leclerc took victory and broke something of a curse of his home Grand Prix. But this year, Sam, we come in after a Max Verstappen win in Imola. Can he make it 2 in a row?
I mean, it's possible, but I'm also conflicted. And there's a couple of reasons why. Max Verstappen, for as good as he is not that great around Monaco. He's had a couple of accidents here. He's only won twice. Gosh, imagine only winning on those tracks twice in life. He's washed. But it sounds silly, I know. But here's all the tracks he's won at more than that: Spielberg, Mexico City, Suzuka, Imola, Yas Marina, Barcelona, Montreal, Austin, Zandvoort, Spa, Interlagos, and then he's got the same amount of wins at Monaco that he has at Losail in Qatar. Right? He's been at Monaco a lot more times than he's been to Qatar. So not his best ever racetrack. But on the other hand, you'll notice that the pace between the Red Bull, Max Verstappen's Red Bull, and those McLarens was far closer in Imola. Now, there is every chance that might be track specific. We know that the Red Bull does very well around very fast corners. You only have to look at Suzuka and Jeddah to understand that is where its strengths lie. But there was a really tiny technical directive that was brought in for the Imola Grand Prix. A part of that was to talk about bodywork that increased tyre cooling. Now, McLaren had been famed, hence the Zak Brown tyre water joke that he brought out, that they have been very good at their tyre cooling, and that's why they're able to extend so long into the races and maintain their tyre pace. Now, it's not confirmed, but there is a chance that this tyre cooling technical directive may have had a bigger impact on McLaren than they were expecting. Plus, the upgrades that were applied to Max Verstappen's car for Imola were a good step forward. That I do think that Max Verstappen, also the fact that he's Max Verstappen, has a very, very good chance of going on to win the Monaco Grand Prix and making it 2-2. I also think because of these upgrades and the way the technical directive is coming into place for Spain, it could be a hat-trick of wins and therefore turning the championship on its head. It's going to be a really interesting Monaco Grand Prix. Can't believe I'm saying that, especially when you add in the fact that we've got 2 pit stops as mandatory for every single team. And Red Bull famously pretty darn slick on its strategy calls. So yeah, I genuinely think there's a very strong chance that Max Verstappen outclasses both of those McLarens.
Harry, back-to-back wins for Verstappen?
I think it's a very feasible scenario. And upgrades aside, I think any track out of all the tracks on the calendar, Monaco's the one that is driver-specific more than any, where the driver can make the difference. I mean, for a brief moment, only 2 years ago, Esteban Ocon was on pole position in an Alpine.
Don't do it to me, man.
And then Fernando Alonso was, until Max Verstappen decided that he is the GOAT of Sector 3 of that track. But my point being, it's that Alpine, I know the Aston Martin was going to start that year, but the Alpine in 2023, what did it do? No, I mean, what does it do anytime? But you know what I mean. So the driver really can make a difference here. So even if McLaren still have a car advantage, and I'd take into account what Sam was saying about the small technical directives that have come in, I don't think it necessarily makes a difference. It's all about whether you can get in the groove and into a rhythm here at Monaco. So if Verstappen can be that driver, then he could well go on and win this one. Hell, even the Ferrari could win it. It happened last year. It could happen again.
Didn't have the laugh track ready.
Sorry, mate.
I think even with the 2-stop strategy that we'll discuss a little bit more later into this episode, qualifying will still be incredibly important. I don't think that will change here. And Verstappen has been very strong in qualifying so far this year. If you look at the last 4 qualifying sessions, including the sprint qualifying that we had in Miami, he's been first, second, and fourth. So he's been very consistent and consistently challenging the McLaren duo. So, and as Harry mentioned, 2023, Verstappen showed that he can when the pressure's on the most at the end of Q3, he is capable of pulling out a lap out the bag, even if it does come at the expense of an Esteban Ocon pole position. For about like 30 seconds, that race, that qualifying session, your boy was dreaming. Shattered though. Absolutely shattered. I mean, Monaco is very difficult to judge because it's just such an outlier. Like, so many of these other tracks we can say going into it, well, this track is very similar to this track. And, we've had 6 races so far this year. We can start to draw some comparisons. Monaco is so often, as Harry puts it, a driver circuit and an outlier where a team can do pretty well at this Grand Prix that hasn't done very well leading up to it, and vice versa. Having said that, I was going to make the same point that you did, Sam, about Red Bull's strength still being those high-speed corners, which doesn't really play into this weekend. When we've seen Suzuka and Jeddah that you've mentioned, like they were pretty competitive at those tracks that have a lot of high-speed corners, but specifically the last 2 races, Imola, of course, Verstappen went on to win and might have even been stronger in high-speed corners than McLaren. But also Miami, the first sector, which was, again, predominantly high speed, that's where Verstappen was strong. It was only the rest of the lap that really let the Red Bull car down. So I'm hesitant to say that Verstappen will go ahead and win a second race in a row. But equally, I'm hesitant to go against him because you wouldn't make a lot of money if you consistently do that. Harry, how happy should they have been with the upgrade that they brought to Imola? And do you think that it will resonate with this weekend, or is it something that might be beneficial, but not necessarily at a track like Monaco?
Look, it will be beneficial if you get a car that's working underneath you and you're happy with the aforementioned rhythm and getting into a groove that you need at Monaco. You can't do that with a terrible car. You still need a good car underneath you. So if Verstappen has the confidence in that car to be able to push it to its limit, I mean, the Saudi pole that he got at Sector 1 especially, if he's got a car underneath him, Verstappen will deliver the lap you need out of it. So I think, whilst the upgrades may not be, they're not Monaco specific. If it's made the car more drivable, it's made it more stable, etc., things that Verstappen wants from his car, then it could well stand him in very good stead. I don't think it's going to be the absolute deal breaker, but it will not adversely affect him, that's for sure.
Sam, it felt like to me like the previous triple header that we had, the leading story of that triple header was Oscar Piastri and him proving that his worth as a championship contender, really making that next step. To me, it feels like this triple header, we've obviously already had Imola, we've got Monaco this weekend, Spain next weekend. It feels to me like the story that could be is Verstappen well and truly being in that championship fight. Because if he and Red Bull are competitive across these 3 weekends, it's 3 very different circuits. So if they were quick this weekend, how encouraging would that be going forward?
Well, we've got a fight on our hands if that's the case. I think if Verstappen goes on to win the next 2 and does make it the hat trick over the triple header, and Norris were to go on and beat Piastri 2 races in a row, let's say they finish the same way they did in Imola, then that points tally will come right down to almost no gap at all between those 3. And we do have a fight on our hands at that point, ladies and gentlemen. But I don't think it's always plain sailing as clear, but if you are going to compare your car to 3 separate tracks, these are 3 separate tracks that would be good to compare yourself to. If you can be fast around the long but quick corners of Imola, great. If you can be fast around the very slow turns of Monaco, brilliant. And if you can maximize that high-speed section of Spain through Sector 1, then you've got a pretty all-round competitive car. The issue is, and it's coming from Max Verstappen himself, he said after the race that, of course, we brought upgrades. I think they worked, but Monaco is very different. It's not our strongest track with the car that we have, so let's see how we're going to perform there. He doesn't believe that the car is going to be that competitive. They could just be playing themselves down. And McLaren, who have been historically this season very good through slow speed corners, you only have to look through that latter stage 2 of Miami going into the 3rd sector, the Mickey Mouse section, as we call it, where they were almost unbeatable.
New sponsor.
Yeah, there you go. New sponsor from Disney coming through as well, although Ferrari have been here for 70 years, folks. So it's not that new. Anyway, there is a real chance that regardless of this upgrade package, regardless of what Red Bull are able to do, regardless of how good Max Verstappen is, that McLaren is sensational. It's so quick. It's such a beast of a car. There is every chance that McLaren go on to dominate this one, especially if Yuki Tsunoda, who we're hoping has the same spec of car as Max Verstappen digging Imola, there's not really a strong chance that he's going to be up there to support. Whereas with this two-stop strategy coming into play, Piastri and Lando can be very clever in the way that they maybe alternate their pit stops. Maybe one runs long, maybe one undercuts. Verstappen's coming up against it. He's going to find it very, very hard, I think, to beat both of them. He will need outright pace, which we don't know if he has just yet.
I think coming out of Imola, the biggest positive for Red Bull was not necessarily outright performance. It was that improvement in tyre wear, that area that McLaren has been incredibly strong versus its competitors so far this year. And I know there has been some speculation as to whether, McLaren have almost come back to the norm based on that directive in Imola. I tend to think it's the opposite. I think Red Bull might have found something. They did bring some upgrades to Imola. And if they have, that's encouraging, because I think I made this point on the review episode. Based on what we saw at Imola, I think Pirelli and F1 are going to be more inclined to try and copy that formula for the rest of this season and introduce some more two stops, more tyre wear. If you can prove that you're on the same level as McLaren, or maybe even better, Christian Horner came out after the race and said that he thought their DEG was better than McLaren's during the Imola race. It takes a lot for an F1 boss to claim that they're actually good at something as well. Not talking down is not, in the nature of these team principles. So,
if anyone's going to, Christian Horner's going to.
Fair point. But yeah, I think it stands a chance of being a positive for the rest of the season. Harry, what percentage chance would you put on McLaren, one of the McLarens, reclaiming a win here?
I'd give it a good 70%.
Not a bad 70, good 70.
Okay. Yes, a positive 70%.
Nice.
Yeah, look, there's that car, even if the Red Bull has caught up, that car's still super, super competitive. And they've got two great drivers behind the wheel. Whereas Red Bull have, let's be honest, a 50% chance in terms of their team, their drivers. McLaren have got double that in terms of their driver lineup. They both have an equal opportunity of winning this, and they were both up there this time last year as well when we got to Monaco. So yeah, this isn't to count them out whatsoever. I think if you do, it's actual peril. McLaren are certainly going to be in the hunt here.
You got a number in mind, Sam?
I'm going 40%. Yeah, I think McLaren have got the car, but Red Bull have got the driver, and Monaco is all about the driver. And whilst I think that the McLaren as an overall package is faster, I don't know if right now in their state, in where they are in their careers and how much they've developed, are able to compete with just the absolute force of nature that is Max Verstappen. We already spoke about that Sector 3 from a couple of years ago. He is a bigger, better, more improved version on that man already. I think he can be the difference maker. So we've also seen McLaren fall over themselves a little bit in terms of communication, how they line up on track and strategy. Monaco, you've got to get that right down to the letter. Red Bull don't have that distraction of another driver, really, unfortunately, for Yuki Tsunoda. So I actually think the favour, if Max is on it, could be very much in their side.
I landed on 70 as well. I went with an average 70 rather than a good 70, but
fair enough.
Splitting hairs at this point.
Onions.
Or splitting onions. Yeah, I've gone with a 70% chance. I think the low speed corner advantage that McLaren have, I'd still trust them to get the win here, but also it would not surprise me whatsoever if Verstappen was in this fight. I think maybe Piastri will fancy his chances based on his qualifying consistency so far this year. As we've already mentioned, qualifying is so important here at Monaco. And if you look at Piastri versus Norris so far this year, if we're looking at front row starts, Piastri has 6, Lando Norris has 3. If we're looking at top 3 starts, Piastri has 8 and Norris has 5. And if we're looking at the top 4 positions in qualifying, Piastri has been in that top 4 every single session so far this year, 9 out of 9. Norris just 6. So Norris can't afford for one of those qualifying blunders to happen here. Otherwise, even in that McLaren, the progress that he would need to make throughout the field might be difficult. And he'd be handing almost the advantage that he somewhat got back in Imola right back to Piastri again. Positions 4 through 8 at Imola were occupied by 3 different teams, Williams, Ferrari and Mercedes. And if we're looking at the last 2 races, Ferrari and Mercedes have 36 points each, but Williams, they're right there with 26. I can't believe we've actually got a segment where we're looking at 3 teams and comparing them, and it's Ferrari, Mercedes and Williams. But Sam, of those 3 teams, who do you think should be most optimistic going into this weekend?
It's great to talk about 3 of the most iconic games of motorsport all together and them actually being somewhat competitive. Well done for Ferrari for clinging on. You're doing a great job. Who could be most competitive here? Dare I say Williams might be feeling most confident? I think they've got the lowest expectations. And I think, once again, if they expect to be their level with even one of those teams, if not both of them, that's a fantastic step forward. I said it in our last episode. Williams are no longer considered these straight line merchants where all they've got is straight line speed. And the moment we get to a slow speed track, they struggle. Imola is considered not a straight line speed track, right? It's all about your cornering. And they did a really, really good job. Both Albon and Sainz did fantastically well. And we spoke about how actually did they walk away feeling a bit unlucky, feeling like they weren't able to maximize that Grand Prix. The same, I think, might be able to be said here for Monaco. I think there's every chance that they are fighting in and around that kind of 5th, 6th, down to 9th position. And if both cars get into Q3, that's where they belong now. I think they've done a solid job. But I do think it will be Mercedes who will be the ones that will be able to maximize this, specifically George Russell. We've spoken about how that Mercedes is so good at being an all-rounder at the moment. They're not bouncing with their porpoising anymore. The car seems rock solid with things like tyre wear. It seems great at kind of all aspects of a circuit. It's not the ultimate package, but it's a really solid jack of all trades. And where Ferrari seem to fluctuate from being really quick from a moment of race pace to qualifying 11th and 12th, embarrassingly last Grand Prix, Mercedes and Russell have been by far the most consistent package outside of those top 2 teams in Verstappen and Red Bull and the 2 McLaren drivers. So if Antonelli can pick up where he left off before Imola and Russell just carries on being George Russell, I think their package and those 2 drivers are very much the ones that are going to be the hardest to beat outside of those front 3 places.
Harry, who do you trust the most of those 3 teams?
Yeah, really. I mean, great to say this, but Williams, I think, bizarre to say, but given the woes Mercedes had in Imola, and that was more race pace, so I fully expect the Mercedes drivers to be quick this weekend. And George Russell is, he's pretty good at qualifying, and if he can qualify as high as he has been, he's got a pretty good chance of staying there with the race at Monaco being quite difficult to overtake. But Williams, you're right, Sam, that whereas there was a time where they could only go in straight lines, they proved last weekend at a track where there's a lot of corners that they have got a super solid car. And I think that's going to stand them in really good stead. Carlos Sainz is actually pretty decent around Monaco. It perhaps slightly overshadowed by the fact that Charles Leclerc is even better. But Sainz is a decent peddler around this track. So I think that, he must be fancying his chances. So yeah, I'm going to go with Williams. If Ferrari could... My worry with Ferrari is...
If Ferrari starts so many sentences.
Yeah. My worry with Ferrari is...
My worries.
All above.
Yeah, it should be plural. If they can go as well as they did in the race, but in qualifying this weekend, they could be in the mix. I genuinely think they could be. However, I have zero trust that they will be that good in qualifying this weekend. If they have another Imola qualifying, I know I joked about it last time, they really should just pack up and go home. There's literally no point carrying on from that point. 11th and 12th for Ferrari this weekend in quali is disastrous. So, I'm not counting them out yet, but maybe after Saturday I will.
We'll wait till Saturday, yeah. I'd lean Mercedes, but not with a lot of confidence on who I have the most confidence in going into this weekend, even after what was a very difficult Imola weekend, because going into that race, there was genuine even if it was muted, there was genuine optimism from Mercedes that the upgrades that they were bringing could have a substantial impact on the car, and it just didn't. They were really struggling. If it weren't for the way the strategy went, I do wonder what would have happened with George Russell defending against the likes of the Williams cars and then later the Ferrari cars. Like, he wasn't looking great, and he was brought in very early in that Grand Prix. Imola, I think, kind of confirmed that there are still two weaknesses of Mercedes, which are high-speed corners. They haven't done great at those tracks so far this year. And also, even if it's not as much of a weakness as last year, there does seem to be a lingering issue about these high temperatures. And George Russell, after the Grand Prix, sounded a little bit worried going into the summer months that it is still something that they are tackling, that they haven't got on top of. This weekend, we're looking at maybe 20 degrees on race day. So it's probably warm, not hot, you would say. But whether they're going to struggle on tyre wear again with the two-stop mandatory, that might actually help Mercedes. Who knows? And of course, high-speed corners, not much of a factor here, which is why I would lean towards them. Sam, what are your thoughts on Ferrari?
What are my thoughts on Ferrari, Ben? That's a great question. I don't know. Ferrari know their thoughts on Ferrari at this point. They are very confusing, very hard to analyze. It's difficult to know if they've actually understood these upgrades that they put on the car over the last few races and whether these setup and kind of floor issues that they were going through have finally been rectified. It looked like in race pace, once they were running the softer of the two race tyres that we used, the medium or the hard, they genuinely seemed very competitive and they look great in a straight line. Ferrari in a straight line, famously quite a good combination. The issue, of course, at Monaco, not a lot of straight lines. You don't really tend to hit your top speed around here if you're new to F1. And that's where my worry kind of starts and very much carries on. I think the one area that Ferrari are going to be very good at is very high speed overtaking. And that is a worry because they're not great going through very slow corners. You saw it again in Miami through the slow section. They weren't brilliant there and they can't hold on to their tyres too well either, as was displayed in Imola. They ran that softest set of tyres in the Imola qualifying, and they were knocked out so quickly because their final sectors just couldn't show any improvement. So I am nervous that qualifying will be the breaker of their weekend and they won't be able to really be in the fight. But the one positive here is that amazingly, they've been quite on it with pit stops for the most part and calling proactive strategy. Now, I know that Imola, we went into the Admiral Leclerc trap and it didn't work out, but it was proactive and it did move him in front of a lot of cars. And they did well with Hamilton to react under both VSC and safety car as well. So if there is an opportunity to react quickly, maybe that's where Ferrari's advantage lies. But otherwise, I don't know how well they're going to fare against, especially Russell, but the threat of Antonelli, Sainz, Albon, it's going to be a tough one for them.
Fortunately, pit stop errors and Ferrari and Monaco
never happened.
Nah.
They're very rare, actually. They don't, that's not something that happens very often.
You get 2 attempts at it as well. I'm sure they'll smash both.
Stay out, stay out, stay out. No! Charles Leclerc. Yeah, I have zero confidence in Ferrari this weekend.
Good.
Hey, if you want to prove me wrong, Ferrari, I'm very, very happy for you to do so. I'm very happy. There is, again, the caveat that past performance isn't necessarily an indicator of future success when it comes to Monaco because it is such an outlier of a circuit. But typically, you do need 2 things to go well at Monaco. You need low-speed corner performance and you need to be good in qualifying. If you asked me, what are Ferrari's 2 biggest weaknesses? Those are the 2 things I would say. Low-speed corners kind of speaks for itself. As you've already said, Sam, you don't hit your top speed here. Most of the track is low speed. You need to be good at that. In terms of qualifying pace, they have really struggled so far to see. I know there's been a lot of focus on what happened at Imola, but it's not like the qualifying performance has been very strong before that. We've had Charles Leclerc all year has had 1 3rd place qualifying start. And I still don't think he's been within 3 tenths of a pole lap this year. If we're taking away, just take away like the Chinese sprint where Ferrari decided they could be good for 1 day, like forget that. The rest of the qualifying sessions, they haven't been close. Lewis Hamilton has struggled to get inside the top 6, let alone any further up than that. And of course, Imola and Miami, he's had consecutive Q2 knockouts. You can't have that here. Like, that isn't going to go well for you at all, even with these additional strategic elements. So again, if you want to prove me wrong and win this race again like you did last year, I will not complain, and I will very happily say that I'm wrong. But for now, I be worried for them. Shall we do some bold predictions?
Gather around, little children, and listen to my song about my F1 bold predictions and how they'll all be wrong.
And indeed, they all were wrong. For Imola, sound like a broken record at this point, because the current standings, 6 races in, Sam has 1. Myself and Harry have 1 less than that. So, bold prediction here. Harry, what have you got?
Double Aston Martin points.
My man,
I thought you were going to say podium then.
So was I. I was about to say, man, them, calm yourself. But
No, we'll just settle for points at this stage. That's okay. Please.
I think we'll get on to Aston Martin in a bit, but I think there's something in it.
Sam, what's yours?
Isaac Hadjar, top 4 finish. The Rizzler's coming for you.
For your top 4.
I've got, unbelievably, Harry already mentioned this within like 2 minutes of the podcast starting, but I'm still burned by Esteban Ocon not getting pole. And I'm not predicting an Ocon pole here, but I think he qualifies inside the top 6. I think Haas and Ocon might be sneaky good this weekend.
Okay, can't wait for them to be 19th.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that
we'll be top 6?
they can only be good at, like, there's only a certain amount of good that they have, so they didn't do any of it in Imola. They saved it up for Monaco.
The good juice.
Yeah, they saved up the good
Feels like
juice.
Every 3 or 4 races, they're just really good. And then they go back to Imola.
Hey, Komatsu, bring out the jar of good juice for this weekend. We need to have a little sip of the good juice.
Can we never use that phrase again, please?
New merch coming soon.
No.
Just jars of juice.
Komatsu's good juice. Available now.
No!
Yes.
All of the no's.
I'll sign a jar at the next time we see you, listeners.
Yeah.
Hold 1, 2, 3, Harry.
That's my outro sorted. Pole position, Max Verstappen. The win, Max Verstappen. Lando Norris in 2nd and Oscar Piastri in 3rd.
Sam?
Pole, Max. Wing, Max. Piastri, 2nd. Isaac Hadjar, 3rd.
It's not. Hang on a second. Boom. Why would you say top 4 if he's getting a podium? Why would you?
Because, look, it's bold enough, all right? I can put it in the top 3, it don't matter. If he gets 4th, I'm still right. We're fine.
I've gone with pole position, Oscar Piastri. The win, Oscar Piastri. 2nd, Max Verstappen. 3rd, George Russell.
Oh, nice. Okay. Lando got faring too well.
Yeah, I just bit shaky, with qualifying.
What I think might actually impact them is they're so close as a pairing that with this 2-stop mandatory strategy coming in, there's every chance one of them will have to take a back seat and might miss out on the optimum lap to do something. It could be costly.
Yeah, that's something to look out for sure. Let's move on to a team that we have mentioned once or twice so far today, and that is Aston Martin. And they had a very good qualifying session that slightly unraveled during the Grand Prix to end up with 0 points. But even so, a far more encouraging weekend for the team. Harry, I guess the answer's probably yes, given what you've already said in your bold prediction. But can they carry on the momentum that they showed in qualifying?
Yes, I do think they can. I think that upgrade they brought. Now I know there'll be some chatter that it was the medium tire that gave them that advantage, but and maybe that's so, but I still think there was a genuinely good car in Imola last weekend. And in the same way I was saying about Williams, where Imola's got a lot of corners, I think that does stand them in good stead for this weekend. I'm not suggesting it's going to be another P5 on the grid for Alonso, although it is Monaco. He can put out a good lap here when he needs to. What are you going to say?
And then truly train in the race.
And then truly train so that Lance Stroll can get a pit stop gap and get a puncture. But yeah, so Alonso could make a difference here. But I do think that car has made a definite step up, even versus where it was this time last year. I think I saw a comparison as to the Imola qualifying 2024 versus 2025, and it was quite a sizable chunk. So they've unlocked something in that car, and I think it could stand them in good stead for the weekend ahead. They just need to execute it. I was going to say better, just execute it, because they didn't even do that last time.
Very fair.
Yeah, I think there is a chance they can carry that momentum through, because they applied the update to Lance Stroll's car on the Friday, and they essentially, very clever of Aston Martin, they decided overnight, like based on how Friday went for Lance Stroll, are we also then going to apply the update to Fernando Alonso's car? And the answer was yes, seemingly proving that the update was actually an upgrade rather than a downgrade, as so many of their attempted updates have been over the last couple of years. So that's encouraging as a starting point. Obviously, 5th and 8th place in qualifying was far better than we were expecting or what they've achieved so far this year. And yeah, maybe the medium tyre played into it a little bit, but it's not like that medium tyre was massively faster than the soft tyre. Otherwise, everyone would have gone for it. It was still competitive. And I think the fact that they were even in the mix for Q3, let alone actually made it through, is, again, very encouraging. According to Andy Cow, of course, now team principal at the team, he has conducted quite a thorough review of the processes that they've had. And he has admitted, and I think this is great that he has admitted, that the start that they had in 2023 caused some of those processes not to be looked at as stringently as they should have been. Like, they managed to unlock something brilliant, or at least something far better than every other team that wasn't Red Bull to start 2023. And they kind of rode that for a little bit before it started to run out and other teams started to catch up. Now they're reviewing these processes. If it can lead to, not necessarily this year, but if it can lead to in future years more upgrades that actually work, then maybe they can become more of a factor. Sam, your thoughts on Aston Martin heading into the weekend?
Well, what were they good at Imola? Qualifying. What did you need to be good at in Monaco? Qualifying. What weren't they good at in Imola? Remembering to do more than one pit stop when it mattered. What do you have to do at Monaco? At least 2 pit stops. Now, I think that stands in a good stead to start with, but the upgrades were mighty that they brought in Imola. They brought in so many things. They had a major overhaul to the floor, the underfloor, the diffuser. There was also some changes to the side pods, the engine cover, and a slight geometry change to the front wing end plates. So almost a new car in many aspects. And what Andy Cow came out and said, which was on Friday, like you said, Ben, they ran the upgrades on Lance Stroll's car, and these upgrades were tested in their old wind tunnel. And so they need to get on-track real data to make sure it seemed valid. And once they could compare the on-track data to the new and old wind tunnel data, they could see it was effective. So they put the upgrades onto Fernando Alonso's car, and they were effective. I don't think that change to medium tyre at Imola qualifying was the only thing that saw them be in Q3. Alonso was genuinely brilliant. Lance Stroll was effective. It showed that the car, not just a driver, not just a moment, was elevated. It was better. So if they can repeat that qualifying, even to 90% of its capability at Monaco, and maybe they qualify 7th and 9th or 7th and 10th. I genuinely believe that points are very much on the card. And I think that these upgrades are going to help them, especially at a track like Monaco, where it is so corner heavy. I'm expecting good things. And actually, Harry, I think your double point for Aston Martin is a crafty little move to get yourself a bogey P, because I think it could come true. I think they have a really good option here to finally get Alonso's first points on the board.
No chance. Sorry. This the mandatory 2-stop rule that's coming in for this weekend and this weekend only. We've discussed it a little bit throughout this episode, Harry, but what impact do you expect it will have? What strategies do you think we might see?
I think the main thing that, classically over the years, or at least modern years, Monaco's been a one-stop, and it's either you do the Esteban Ocon Imola strategy, as it's now known, and you might be near the back and
retire.
You pit early, retire for no reason. But you pit early and you go as long as you can, because you're going to have clean air to catch up to the back of the pack, and then when everyone else stops, you've already made your stop and you just hold everyone up. Or you do what Charles Leclerc did last year and just drive to a delta for the entirety of the race, so there's never a big enough gap for anyone to undercut you. That won't be a feasible strategy this year, because that first plan won't work, because everyone will still have to stop again. And if it does work, if it does play, and you've got to might have to make some moves, etc. And the same for the secondary plan, which is trying to just drive to a delta. The leaders will be forced, I think, to drive actually quickly, which is a ridiculous thing to say, but I genuinely do think that will happen. So that in itself will affect strategy. It might cause a few more incidents. I'm not saying this is. I think we're all in agreement. It's not a perfect solution by any means, but I think at the very least we'll just see a slight mix up in the way the race runs. Which I think in itself is a good thing for Monaco.
I'm intrigued by it. I think it will be maybe relatively routine for the top teams. I think they'll probably balance themselves out and find a similar-ish solution to the problem that is new. I am intrigued by. I'm more intrigued the further back you go, because there could be some wacky strategy calls from those at the very back of qualifying. Like, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we do get some drivers hit on the first lap and then hope essentially that they can catch up to around the back of the pack before anyone else has made their first stop. At which point, a safety car makes an appearance and they can make a second stop. Because even if at that point they drop to the back, the whole field is together, but you've made your two stops and no one else has. That could work maybe for someone who is in a back market team. Equally, it wouldn't shock me if maybe one driver who is very far back again decides to go all the way to the end of this race and then do two pit stops at the end. Basically, not even praying for a safety car. You're at that point just praying for a red flag. And that would work out very well indeed.
Could you imagine? Oh, no.
Sam, what do you think this two-stop mandatory is gonna do to this race?
Well, it could be really exciting, or it could end up being one of the most anticlimactic changes that we've seen in Formula One. I think if we get two safety cars, very close together, that might ruin the fun. What I want to see is exactly what you detailed. I want to see a car stop on lap one, catch up to the back, and hope they get lucky. I want to see, Liam Lawson go, I'm not going to stop till lap 75. I'm just going to stay out and hope that something happens where I get lucky. And why not? Why not try it? Why, if you've got no hope of points, I want to see that. And if that's what we get, if we get some weird and wacky strategies where cars are all over the place in terms of the order and you can't actually really work out who's going to end up where, that for me makes the Monaco Grand Prix a bit more exciting. But I'm not holding my breath. I'm going into it with an open mind. I'm hoping that I come out of this and we do our review on Sunday. And I go, you know what? I found it interesting and I enjoyed what I saw. That for me will be a good step forward in the right direction, although I don't know if this will be the absolute saviour of the Monaco Grand Prix.